This is Ling Jiang from York University in Canada. I'm going to present the research on crowdworker perceptions of microtask payments in work versus leisure situations. This is a collaborative study with Professor Christian Wagner from the City University of Hong Kong. Let's start with one example of a microtask, which is to extract purchased items from a shopping receipt. As you can see from this example, the price for this task is only 1 US cent. Are you willing to take this task? I guess your answer might be no. However, hundreds of thousands of such low-paying tasks are available and performed at any moment. This figure shows the task list on Amazon Mechanical Turk, which is a popular crowdsourcing platform launched by Amazon. The highlight column refers to the number of tasks available, and you can see that the majority of those tasks has payment below 10 cents, and some could be as low as just 1 cent. And among the top 20 countries of MTech workers, the top 3 countries are the US, India, and Canada. Prior research also investigated the hourly wage earned by workers from different countries across different crowdsourcing platforms. Even for workers in those developed countries in North America, the average hourly wage, which is $4.7 US, is still way below the minimum wage rate in the US. Researchers have expressed concerns with microtask crowdsourcing. Some regard those platforms as a digital thrift shop because the platforms exploit online labor by low payments. They even dehumanize online labor by commodifying human work efforts. However, people continue microworking regardless of such low payment. To explain microworkers' participation, prior research has provided some explanations. Some researchers identified the microworkers' motivations, including extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, and also the time structure benefits. Other researchers also identified the duality of microworking in terms of empowerment and marginalization. On one hand, the crowdsourcing platforms provide affordances of technology to make the work more portable and the work equipment more affordable. And more importantly, the entire work processes are virtual online. In this regard, those platforms foster fair labor markets by boundaryless and low-cost entry into the labor market. On the other hand, there's a lack of protection for work rights, and workers have little bargaining power to negotiate payment rates. In that case, the inequality and the precarity are further ingrained in online labor markets. Even though we understand the pros and cons of the crowdsourcing platforms, we still have limited knowledge on the extent to which the payment is perceived as low from workers' perspective. To fill this research gap, this study tries to address 3 research questions. Firstly, we would like to understand the nature of microworking, whether it is perceived as work or leisure from workers' perspective. And then we would like to explore the alternative activities of microworking. And finally, we investigate how workers evaluate the activities of microworking versus alternative activities. To answer those research questions, we administered an online survey on mTurk. The survey was actually a hit posted on mTurk with a compensation of $1 US if workers successfully completed the task. The main concern behind this data collection is what if the survey attracts specific workers, which we call survey takers here. To avoid such kind of bias, we designed a screening question on workers' most frequently completed task type to distinguish survey takers from non-survey takers. We conducted 3 rounds of surveys in that case. The first round included a mixture of survey takers and non-survey takers without any screening. The other two rounds of surveys targeted non-survey takers and survey takers respectively. In total, we collected data from 345 respondents on mTurk. Here are the sample demographics, which are in line with the demographics reported in price studies on mTurk. As you can see that the majority of the respondents are from the young generation and they're highly educated. And actually half of the respondents have full-time job in traditional workplaces. To identify the nature of microworking in terms of work versus leisure, we measured the work and leisure attitudes towards completing tasks on mTurk through two separate questions. Instead of considering work and leisure as two ends of one continuum, we regard them as two different constructs. So this is the reason we have two separate questions to measure work and leisure respectively. Additionally, we also measure workers' experiences of completing his or mTurk in terms of two wage rates. The one we called odd wage rates, which refers to how much 1 hour of task on mTurk should be paid for, which is collected through self-report wage rate. And the other one we called is wage rate, which refers to how much 1 hour's task on mTurk is actually paid for. This is a measurement for actual wage rate earned by workers. We calculate the wage rate by self-report weekly earnings divided by weekly hours. Here are the results of the work versus leisure comparison. Given workers' rating on work and leisure perceptions, we conducted clustering analysis to identify 4 clusters, including work and leisure, pure work, pure leisure, and leisure work, non-leisure. And you can see that almost 1/3 of our respondents have high work attitude and high leisure attitude, which indicates the coexistence of work and leisure perceptions. When it comes to wage rate, the odd wage rate is around $4 per hour. In contrast, the ease work rate is around $2 per hour, which is way below the odd wage rate. We further compare the amount of the wage rate, and then it shows that almost the ease work wage rate is only 60% of odd wage rate. And regarding the percentage of respondents who have lower ease work rate than odd work rate, the percentage is almost 80%. To explore the alternative activities of microworking and investigate how workers evaluate those activities, we designed such a matrix question, including the qualitative part for the alternative activities and the quantitative part for the evaluation. Regarding the alternative activities, we asked respondents to specify up to 5 alternative activities. For the evaluation, we employed a multi-attribute evaluation in terms of 7 dimensions, which are widely identified in the literature. The scale used in this evaluation refers to the perceived values, so we have a subjective rating range from -100 refers to the extremely negative to positive 100, which refers to extremely positive, and with 0 as a neutral point. Based on the qualitative task of the alternative activities, we conducted text analysis. On the left-hand side, you can see the word cloud of those text responses, and we conducted topic modeling to identify 6 topics emerging from the text responses. Here are the top terms for each topic. According to the results of text analysis, we can see that the 6 leading alternative activities are play games, watch movies, hang out with friends, Facebook, watch TV, and read a book. An interesting observation is that microworking makes money while alternative activities actually cost money. Furthermore, we can see that the activity of microworking has pretty high subjective ratings across those 7 dimensions. In order to compare the monetary rating with the non-monetary ratings, we innovatively designed a calibration ratio to convert the subjective rating to monetary equivalent. This is the way how we calculate calibration ratio. It is calculated by the actual hourly wage of microwork divided by the subjective rating on the money dimension. Here is an example to illustrate. If the worker has an actual hourly wage at 2.50 per hour, and then if the worker rated this subjective perception on monetary dimension as 80, then we can have the calibration ratio. And then given the remaining non-monetary ratings, we can calculate the monetary equivalent by multiplying the non-monetary attributes by this calibration ratio. Then we get the monetary equivalent for all the non-monetary dimensions. In that case, because all dimensions have been converted to the monetary equivalents, then we can do the aggregations and comparison across dimensions. Converting the subjective ratings to monetary equivalent, we can calculate the total monetary equivalent for each activity by aggregating all 7 dimensions. And the result shows that microworking is actually a high monetary equivalent generating activity compared with the alternative activities. Here is a summary of our findings. Firstly, we can see that work and leisure are not mutually exclusive, and alternative activities are dominated by leisure activities. Secondly, the lowness of microwork participation could take different forms, and our study proposed 3 forms which could be used to evaluate the lowness of the payment. Finally, comparing microwork participation with alternative activities, we find that microwork activity has advantages over alternatives, and it could be a choice with meaningful monetary equivalent. We conclude our study by discussing the practical implications. For task and platform design, the coexistence of work and leisure suggests that the platform could cultivate worker professionalism and gamify microtasks. The platform could also invite workers to report their attitudes and perceptions. When it comes to policymaking and the governance of the online workforces, we suggest policymakers distinguish different worker status and formulate different policies tailored to different groups of microworkers. They could also monitor the ratio of microworkers who depend on microworking for a living wage. That's it for our presentation, and thank you.